Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says China's growing influence poses a threat to the security of the alliance. Speaking after the NATO summit in Brussels, Stoltenberg said the leaders of the alliance have agreed on the need to counter China. He went on to say that the alliance has no intention to deploy nuclear missiles in Europe, but will respond to Russia's growing arsenal. On Afghanistan, he said that NATO leaders have agreed to maintain funding for Kabul airport after their military mission ends. In Pakistan, 4 soldiers have been martyred in an IED attack by terrorists in Quetta. The military's media wing said a search operation to apprehend the terrorists has been launched. It added that such cowardly attacks can't sabotage peace in Balochistan. Pakistan has warned against peace spoilers within and outside Afghanistan that have benefited from the war economy. Addressing the Pakistan-Afghanistan Track 2 dialogue in Islamabad, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the Afghan issue can only be resolved through dialogue as war and reconciliation cannot go together. He added there is limited window of opportunity for lasting peace in Afghanistan and its leadership must seize this opportunity. In Myanmar, the trial of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi gets underway 4 months after a military coup. She faces charges of corruption, owning unlicensed walkie-talkies, and violating COVID-19 restrictions. Human rights groups condemned the trial, describing it as an attempt to stop her running in the future elections. India has reported nearly 4,000 deaths from coronavirus and over 70,000 infections overnight. In Pakistan, 34 people have lost their lives to the virus, while over 1,000 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 3.8 million lives and infected over 175.8 million people. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says China's growing influence poses a threat to security of the alliance. Speaking after the NATO summit in Brussels, Stoltenberg said China is rapidly expanding its nuclear arsenal with advanced nuclear warheads. He said the leaders of the alliance have agreed on the need to counter China's influence. He went on to say that the alliance has no intention to deploy nuclear missiles in Europe, but will respond to Russia's growing arsenal. On Afghanistan, he said that NATO leaders have agreed to maintain funding for Kabul airport after their military mission ends. Stoltenberg said NATO fully supports the decision to extend the New START treaty and will welcome new strategic talks on future arms control. The meeting also decided to strengthen the alliance's capabilities in the areas of space and cybersecurity. In Pakistan, 4 soldiers have been martyred in an IED attack by terrorists in Quetta. The military's media wing said a search operation to apprehend the terrorists has been launched. It said such cowardly acts backed by inimical elements cannot sabotage hard-earned peace and prosperity in Balochistan. It added that security forces are determined to neutralize their nefarious designs. Pakistan has warned against peace spoilers within and outside Afghanistan that have benefited from the war economy. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said this while addressing Pakistan-Afghanistan Track 2 dialogue in Islamabad.
Qureshi said the Afghan issue can only be resolved through dialogue as war and reconciliation cannot go together. He added there is a limited window of opportunity for lasting peace in Afghanistan and its leadership must seize this. Qureshi said Pakistan wants peace in Afghanistan, therefore it has engaged all ethnic leaders. He thanked the Afghan leadership for acknowledging Islamabad's constructive and positive role in the peace process, but criticized Afghan National Security Advisor Hamdullah Mohib's statement against Islamabad. The two-day Pakistan-Afghanistan Track 2 dialogue is discussing challenges following the withdrawal of foreign troops from Kabul. Apart from Pakistan and Afghanistan, the conference will also be attended by delegates from Doha.
Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says relations between Pakistan and Russia have improved significantly over the past 2 decades. He was speaking to his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov over the phone. Qureshi said ties with Russia are a key priority of the country's foreign policy. He said the two sides are keen to deepen their multidimensional partnership. Qureshi also requested assistance in procuring 5 million doses of Sputnik V vaccines. The two foreign ministers also exchanged views on regional and global issues of mutual interest. They also agreed to work closely for an early political settlement in Afghanistan. The United States sanctions imposed on Moscow on a number of transactions with Russia's sovereign debt formally entered into force today. The curbs were announced on the 15th of April over accusations of Moscow's interference in the 2020 U.S. elections, cyber hacking, bullying Ukraine, and other acts. They target the primary market of the Russian currency ruble, or non-ruble bonds issued after the 14th of June by the Central Bank of the Russian Federation. The United States financial institutions are now completely prohibited to participate in financial exchanges with Russia over the bonds. The restrictions are the first measures of this magnitude under the current U.S. administration. U.S. President Joe Biden says he intends to tell his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin that Moscow and Washington may find spheres of cooperation. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made the remarks in an interview ahead of the summit of Biden and Putin on the 16th of June in Geneva. Blinken said the president will reiterate United States' desire for more predictable relations with Russia. The Secretary of State said there are areas where it is in the two countries' interest to cooperate. However, Washington will respond forcefully to Moscow's reckless and aggressive actions. The top U.S. diplomat said the United States will see if Russia makes good on any commitments it makes. He said that it reinvigorated American leadership will bring world democracies together in common causes and purpose. In Yemen, the Saudi-led coalition says it has intercepted and destroyed an explosive-laden drone launched by the Houthi rebels. The coalition said the drone was launched towards the Khamis Mushahid region in Saudi Arabia. It added that it has thwarted all hostile Houthi attempts aimed at targeting civilians and civilian objects. Earlier, Saudi state media said a drone rigged with explosives fell on a school in the kingdom's Asir province. Pakistan has condemned the Houthis' attack and reaffirmed its solidarity with Saudi Arabia. Israel's parliament has approved a new unity government ending Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's record 12-long-year tenure.
Israel's parliament has approved a new unity government ending Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's record 12-year-long tenure. Under a deal, ultra-nationalist Bennett will head the new cabinet for a little over 2 years before his centrist ally Yair Lapid takes over. They will head a government of parties from across the political spectrum, including for the first time one that represents a minority comprising of Palestinian citizens. Netanyahu failed to form a government after Israel's March 23rd election, its fourth in 2 years. Addressing the parliament, 71-year-old Netanyahu said he would be back sooner than expected. Meanwhile, thousands of people turned out across the country to celebrate the end of Benjamin Netanyahu's record rule. However, Palestinians were unmoved by the change of administration, predicting that Bennett would pursue Netanyahu's right-wing agenda. Bennett, a former defense chief, advocates annexing parts of the occupied West Bank. U.S. President Joe Biden congratulated Bennett, saying he looked forward to strengthening the close and enduring relationship between the two countries.
Iran says the new government of Israel should learn from the fall of Benjamin Netanyahu. In a tweet, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said the long period of Netanyahu's tyranny, attacks on Palestinians, and threats of permanent annexation came to an end. Zarif said the governments founded on aggression and persecution do not survive. In Myanmar, the trial of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi gets underway 4 months after a military coup. She is charged with owning unlicensed walkie-talkies and violating COVID-19 restrictions and allegations of corruption. Human rights groups condemned the trial and described it as an attempt to stop her running in the future elections. Suu Kyi faces another trial over sedation charges, which will be held on the 15th of June. The military has justified seizing power in February by alleged voter fraud in general elections held last year. The coup triggered widespread demonstrations across the country, which resulted in deaths of more than 800 people by the security forces. India has reported nearly 4,000 deaths from coronavirus and over 70,000 infections overnight.
While India has reported a dip in new cases and deaths, a New York Times report says the numbers are highly underreported. Meanwhile, Brazil has registered close to 38,000 infections with over 1,100 deaths overnight. Britain is once again losing ground to the virus as cases shoot past 7,000 for the 8th straight day. Senior ministers have signed off a decision to delay the lifting of all coronavirus restrictions in England. In Thailand, a series of coronavirus outbreaks in factories is threatening to further undermine the economy by delaying the lifting of restrictions. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 3.8 million lives and infected over 175.8 million people.
In Pakistan, coronavirus has claimed 34 more lives in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says a little over 1,000 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The country has reported nearly 22,000 deaths and over 942,000 cases since the pandemic began. More than 878,000 people have recovered so far, while over 41,000 cases are still active. Over 2,600 of them are in critical condition. Meanwhile, authorities said the country's positivity ratio has once again dropped below 3%. In the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, condemnations of Sopory massacre continue to pour in for the third consecutive day. On Saturday, the Indian-occupying troops martyred 4 innocent civilians in a military operation. In a statement, a Tehreek-e-Wahdat-e-Islami spokesperson said the brutal killing was an eye-opener for the international community. He appealed to the United Nations to take notice of the ongoing Indian war crimes in the territory. The Jammu and Kashmir Freedom Front also condemned the continued unlawful detention of Hurriyat leaders and activists. The navies of Pakistan and Italy have conducted a joint passage exercise in the Gulf of Aden. According to the Navy's media wing, the drills aim to enhance interoperability. In a tweet, it said the two states look forward to strengthening relations. The drills include maritime interdiction operations, cross-deck landings, among other procedures. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Egypt says ties with Turkey can progress if there is non-interference in internal affairs. The two sides cut diplomatic contact in 2013 after the ouster of President Mohamed Morsi. Egypt's Foreign Minister Sami Shukri says Turkey's desire to improve relations is admirable. In an interview, Shukri said Ankara declared its commitments to international law and diplomatic practices. He added that Cairo wants good ties with regional and international partners on solid grounds. Shukri said bilateral relations would develop at the right time after evaluating that it is really in Egypt's interests. In Japan, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says general elections are possible if the opposition submits a no-confidence vote. Talking to reporters in England, Suga said he will decide on the elections when the time comes. He reiterated that bringing COVID-19 under control remains his top priority. The opposition parties have called for a 3-month extension to the current session, which expires on Wednesday. They are considering a no-confidence vote if their request is not met. The general election must take place before the current 4-year term of the lower house ends on the 21st of October. Saudi Arabia has announced that women can now register for the annual Hajj pilgrimage without a male guardian. In a tweet, the Ministry of Hajj and Umrah said women can also register along with other females. The development comes days after it was announced that Saudi women can now live on their own without requiring the consent of their father or male guardian. On Saturday, Saudi Arabia announced it will allow 60,000 residents vaccinated against COVID-19 to perform this year's Hajj, but Muslims from abroad would be barred for a second straight year. Iraq has opened a mass gravesite of the Budash prison massacre in a bid to identify the victims. Iraqi authorities said they have recovered the remains of 123 people from the site. Dozens of relatives from the victims of the genocide have been given blood samples to match with the DNA of the remains. Authorities say the activity is a challenge as the remains are either burned or worn out over time. ISIS attacked the prison, freed inmates, and shot dead 583 mainly Shiites in 2014. The United Nations says the remains of up to 12,000 people are believed to be buried in these graves. The bodies of 25 migrants have been recovered off the coast of Yemen after their boat capsized. Local officials say the boat overturned 2 days ago and was carrying nearly 200 people. They added that the fate of their other people on board is unclear. The United Nations Migration Agency confirmed that a boat sank in the area, but it said it is still trying to establish the details of this incident. Despite the conflict in Yemen, migrants continue to travel in hopes of moving through to find work in neighboring Saudi Arabia and other oil-rich states. In recent months, dozens of migrants have died on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait that separates Djibouti from Yemen. And in New Zealand, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has criticized a film from being made in her response to the 2019 Christchurch attack. Ardern said the Muslim community should be at the center of any film about the shootings, not her. At a press conference, she said it is a very raw event for New Zealand and even more so for Muslims. She said, however, it was not for her to say whether a project should go ahead or not. A film called They Are Us is being planned about the attacks on 2 mosques by a white supremacist gunman. The U.S.-backed film has been criticized by New Zealand's Muslim community for projecting a white savior narrative. In Malaysia, marine biologists are investigating a mysterious skin disease plaguing white-tip reef sharks. The early findings pointed to increased sea temperatures as a possible cause. More in this report.
A picture taken by an underwater photographer of Borneo Island showed spots and lesions on a reef shark's head. The government and conservation experts also witnessed the disease in various shark groups. The experts see rising sea temperature behind the disease. The team found the rise in sea surface temperature to 29.5 degrees Celsius, a degree higher than in 1985.
We can almost certainly paint the warming oceans as having a role in what we are seeing with the sickly sharks in Sipadan. And for Sipadan case, this is more so in the absence of any clear direct human factors which we are aware of. Because for instance, as Sipadan is a fully marine protected area, any form of fishing is prohibited.
Mohammed Sharif, a professor in aquatic veterinary studies at University Patra, said the reported sightings coincide with reports of coral bleaching in the area. Professor said, "We must not ignore things happening in the area."
We can see that a lot of people are still not convinced that climate change is an issue. Many think that is a made-up story by scientists, but looking at the changes in temperatures, coral bleaching, and so on. I mean, we cannot ignore that things are happening there. Changes are happening there due to higher temperatures.
However, a comprehensive scientific investigation is incomplete, as in May, efforts failed to capture sharks to secure a sample for testing. Meanwhile, a team of experts has planned to make another attempt in the coming months.
The U.S. stocks have opened mixed as investors digested the benchmark's record level heading into a week with a key Federal Reserve meeting. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index opened 0.5% down, while the S&P 500 also edged down more than 0.1%. However, the Nasdaq Composite rose nearly 0.25% at the open. Meanwhile, oil prices rose, supported by economic recovery and the prospect of fuel demand growth as vaccination campaigns in developed countries accelerate. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.